Hello and welcome to another episode of Heartoedify. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about Anchor. It is an application where you can listen to your favorite podcasts, but on top of that, if you're thinking about venturing into starting your own, you can produce a podcast on this or you can distribute your own. And the icing on the cake is that it can all be done for free. It's really user-friendly, so I wanted to just take a moment to tell you about that and hope you go check it out when you get a chance. Now, let's get to it. I get a lot of things from my mom, probably about 90% of my features and my cleanliness, though admittedly I take it to a whole nother extreme. But one of the things that I don't get from her are my tears. I am never at a loss for tears, but that's not something that I saw growing up. I can probably count on one hand how many times I saw my mom cry. But even though I always had tears, I also always viewed them as a sign of weakness. So because of this, I wanted to sit down with my mom and talk to her about tears, yes, but really what it is to be a Black girl dealing with the burden of strength.
Here to edify.
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 Do you ever remember seeing Grandma cry?
I can't say that I've ever seen her cry. No, I don't remember ever seeing her cry.
So what did you feel like growing up? Would you consider yourself emotional? Because I can count on maybe, one hand, and it wouldn't even feel that hand how many times I've seen you cry. But as we know, I am just a very emotional person. And I just don't have that superpower of being able to stop myself from crying when I am feeling, really feeling something. And so, I just wonder, how did you view tears? Would you even consider yourself an emotional child or adolescent?
No, I can't remember me ever being emotional. No, I can't think of a time. The only time I think of being emotional is when there was a death in the family, someone that was close, but I can't remember doing a lot of crying besides getting spankings.
No, that's not how you dealt with sadness or I don't know, or anger. That's just not how you dealt with it, was tears.
No. Not at all.
Did you ever feel like you couldn't or you shouldn't, or that just was not you?
No, it wasn't me. I like I said, even as a young adult, I can remember sometimes that I did cry and I think the what brought tears was I was overwhelmed with something. I think it had something to do with postpartum. After I had my babies, I would feel a little down until I realized, wait a minute, I know what's going on. So I was able to control it. I know a lot of people say they can't, but after I realized that, wait a minute, this is the reason for the sadness, and I thank God for having him in my life, because I would stop and think about, Lord, I can pray to you and I can ask you to give me that peace to take away the sadness. And that's how I dealt with it. So I didn't do a lot of crying that I can think of. I think the last time that I can honestly remember crying was after my dad had passed. And it was maybe a few weeks, maybe even a month after he had passed, because it really hit that he's gone. He's gone. And that sadness came to where, wow, he's really gone. So I remember crying behind that.
That's actually one of the times that I remember seeing you cry and it being slightly shocking. because I mean, makes sense. There, you know, it's a loss, but shocking because that's not a norm. That's not something that I had seen you do, and honestly, even in other, you know, deaths that we had dealt with, hadn't necessarily at least seen it. Do you feel like you saw Black women in general that were in your sphere, whether it be your sisters or your aunt? Do you feel like you saw many Black women in your life cry or shed tears?
I can honestly say I don't. I don't remember that. Not in my family, and neither even my friends that I can think of, you know, seeing them cry often. The only time I can think of that I may have seen them cry was during a death, you know. I'm even trying to think back being a teenager, you know, and thinking of relationships, you know, and how sad you get if there was a breakup or something happened between you guys and you were really upset. I honestly can't even remember any of those things. And I'm sure that in my teenage years, I may have cried. I don't know. I may have cried a few times if I had a breakup, but I always had the attitude where, okay, it's done. You know, I may have felt a little sad, may have got a little teary-eyed or a little crackling in my voice if I've ever spoke to someone about it, but to actually get serious into crying, boo-hoo, I can't remember that. And I don't think that I'm a very hard person because I am very sensitive. I'm very sensitive to different people's feelings. You know, I do get emotional, but I don't get emotional where I break down and cry. I may get emotional where you'll hear cracking in my voice, but actually breaking down and seriously crying. No, I might drop a tear, but I don't know.
Do you feel like, tears aside, just in life growing up, that as a Black woman, maybe that wasn't a space for you, like being emotional or showing emotions? Because like you said, you are emotional, you have emotions, you're human, but just in the sense of, yeah, like, did you feel the freedom as a Black woman to fully show the gambit of emotions? And yeah, some of that may just have been that you as a person, as an individual, are not necessarily a huge crier, but did you feel that, like, well, I have to be strong in the things that I've gone through?
I think that it had a lot to do with I have to be strong. I do. I felt like that I had to be that way because I did. I don't think I've ever even mentioned it, but I always worried about people looking at me to be someone that's soft, that's easy. You know, I just felt like I had to show my strength and my boldness, you know, and that was, you know, it had a lot to do with me not crying. And you asking about my mom, and I think my mom felt the same way. I really believe that my mom felt the same way because I believe she felt that she had to be strong. You know, if she shed tears, she didn't shed tears openly. You know, she may have shed tears when she was by herself, but I don't. I just can't remember ever seeing my mom cry.
What makes you say you think that she may have felt the same, of having to be strong?
I think because my mom was a very proud woman. First of all, she was very proud, and when I say proud, my mom even walked the way she walked. She walked straight back, head up, and I honestly believe that I don't know what her life was like as a younger woman. And I do believe that it had something to do with her growing up, You know, I don't know if that's something that was pushed, you know, when they were children. You know, you stand up straight, you know, you don't show your emotions, you know, you have to be strong, you know. I don't know. I really do. And my mom was a very smart woman, very smart, very, when I say smart, she took her time and from what I saw, that she thought about things before she, for example, I'm thinking, I remember my mom speaking of them living in Washington, D.C., and she wanted to move out of Washington, D.C. because she didn't feel that it was a good place to raise her children. So what did she do? She told my dad, you know, I found a place for us in Virginia, and everything looks good, so we're going to move. You know, and I believe she felt that way. And I think my mom felt that way as well because of her education over my dad that she had. Not that she felt that he was beneath her because he didn't have the education that she had. I believe that she had to feel that she had that education, so she had to stand with that boldness, you know, to, you know, make sure that life worked for them as far as any type of situations that they may have gotten in, that she couldn't be one to buckle and say, well, I don't know what to do. You know, she always made a decision. I think this is what we should do and this is how it's done. Or I believe honestly that she researched it as well.
So that education kind of came with a responsibility.
Yes.
So when you were mentioning, like, for yourself and for grandma about just kind of a potential feeling of weakness with tears, I feel personally that, like, I have felt that, like, that my tears equate to weakness or equate to, you know, remembering times of being honestly upset with myself because in certain situations, that's the only thing, the only outward emotion that can be seen, and feeling more upset in some instances about my tears than I am about whatever brought them on. And so what was it like for you to raise like an emotional child? Like, I mean, because even now, like I cry often, and yeah, like I've never asked you, like, being as how that's not necessarily how you are, I don't know, like, what goes through your mind?
I don't know. I remember praying, and, you know, because a lot of times when you guys were emotional, I'm speaking of teenagers. You know, children, you know, you cry all the time when you can't have this, you can't do this. But I'm speaking of teenagers. I mean, sometimes I didn't know what you were crying about. So I would just pray, you know, Lord, I don't know what's going on, you know, just bless, you know, and help me to respond to them correctly. I may have, and I know I have come to you guys more than once and asked what's wrong. And you guys may have told me, and we just talk about it. You know, we would just talk about it.
Did it ever feel like awkward or uncharted territory?
No, not at all. Not at all. Because I feel like tears are freedom. I do. I feel like that it releases what you may have bottled up in you as far as if it's hurt or worry or discomfort. I do. I feel like it's a outward release. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if you remember, I've said to you that sometime when you cry, and if you cry and then you lie down and you take a nap, when you wake up, you feel free. You feel like a brand new person. Mm-hmm. You do. Of course, that hurt's going to come back in your mind, but I feel like you've released the core of it, you know, and what's still there is just the surface of it, you know, because you've cried so hard to where you've exhausted yourself. You've lay down and rest. And now that you've awakened, it's like, wow, I feel so much better. Even though it's not gone, it's still there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking of like Black women and it kind of just like this expectation of strength seeping through regardless of one's background. Have you ever felt like you wish maybe that wasn't something potentially like placed on Black women? Because I know like me going to school, studying African American studies, like we would always hear this kind of, and these are stereotypes. This is not to say across the board, it's for everyone, but the expectation of like the Black woman to be strong and to take care of in her own way, kind of in the way that we were talking about, grandma having education and, yes, she respected her husband, but also kind of this, because I have this education, there's a responsibility that comes with it to not just sit back and not be assertive in ways. Whereas the white woman is often depicted as someone to be cared for, someone that it's like, this is fragile, porcelain. We care for this in a way that the Black woman, we don't. And so I just wonder, like, have you ever felt the burden or has it ever felt like a burden where it's like, man, I wish I didn't have this kind of proverbial, like, just burden, of strength on me, and wanting maybe to be the woman that's like, can feel confident in saying, no, I want to be taken care of, or I want someone else to carry this, and I can be capable, but also desire to be cared for.
Yeah, I think I can speak for a lot of women that, of course, I wish that, that I didn't have to carry this burden, because that's why, not only speaking of it being carried as a burden, but I think that we as Black women, it's generational.
Yeah.
It's generational that we're told that we have to be strong. We can't be weak. We have to stand. And it is because I have several times, like you saying, speaking of a white race, of course, they usually have so many different outlets where we don't have the outlets. We have to take it as it is and deal with it. We have to take it as it is to deal with it. I have wished several times, why I wish I had an outlet, but at this period, I have to keep going. I can't just buckle and just give up, and that was my attitude throughout my entire life that I can think of, even being young, being a young woman and even growing into being a mother and a wife. I have to keep going. I just can't. I felt like if I didn't keep going, I would fade away. I to be honest, I felt like I'd probably end up in an institution somewhere, because I've just given up. I just can't do it. And I've never wanted that to happen.
It's interesting because it almost seems like an unhealthy form, but its own form of therapy. Because when you're speaking of different outlets, therapy is one of them. Obviously, like now it's a huge hot topic to this, the reality of like, hey, therapy is a good thing. Like for the Black community, like let's lean into this, as opposed to, which maybe historically we'd be like, what? Therapy? You're not, what are you going to therapy for? Whereas now it's like, no, this is helpful. We do have this as an outlet. Let's use it. But hearing you say that, I wonder, we don't know, but even for not just grandma, but our ancestors, if the push through becomes a form of therapy, but I don't know, because I look at therapy to be positive just in nature, but I don't necessarily think that the push through is always positive, because that means that there are a lot of things that are being pushed to the side, you know, that aren't being dealt with that should be. Yeah. And so I don't know, you feel like you've just kind of, how do you feel? You feel like you've just reached a point in life where it's like, this is what it is. Have you ever thought about therapy or any of those things?
I can say at one point in my life, I laugh about it now today. I remember a doctor that I worked with, and I had mentioned to one of the doctors that I needed him to give me something to help me to relax because I felt really bogged down and I just felt like I was losing it. And the reason I felt that way, because this was a period I was taking care of my mom. I was a new mother, you know, a wife, and I just felt like everything was on my shoulders, and I felt like that I was sinking. And the doctor looked at me and he laughed and he said to me, he said, Regina, he said, you're the most sane person around here. He said, we the ones that need something, but you don't need anything. And he was serious, and I was serious to him, but I owe it all to God, because all I could do after that was pray and just ask God to help me daily to be able to handle what I was going through. And as far as thinking of sitting down and talking to someone for therapy or being serious about taking medication, that was the only period in my life that I could think of that I felt that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that doctor was well-intentioned or that was well-intended, that comment. But even that, in a sense, I hear that and I'm like, man, that does a disservice, you know, because it's like, that's also this expectation of like, you are a Black woman, you're doing it. Like, that is the expectation of, because I don't see you sinking, that you're not sinking, you know? And I know this is in regard to just in general, you always tell us, as far as doctors go, like, you know your body, you know, at the end of the day, yes, they've gone to school, but you are living in this. And so if you're feeling something, like, you confidently acknowledge that. And so it's just one of those situations where it's like, yeah, man, I'm sure the intention was not to deter you, but that's the issue with negative stereotypes, is that becomes just our perception in general is like, oh, what? This woman doesn't look like she's sinking. And then there's also not the thought process of, well, when I have, you know, for centuries, you know, it's been passed down to carry massive weights on my shoulder without whimpering, it's going to look different than maybe a group of people that have the freedom to whimper when the weight is not even as heavy, you know, and, you know, to reach out and ask for help. And so that means that, like, we would then have a habit of piling more and more on and ask for help, if at all, much later than the person that has the freedom to ask sooner. And so, yeah, it's really interesting, because I feel like I hear about these things in like this academic sector of just like the strength of Black women, but to like really consider like, oh, like, yeah, I'm a Black woman, and I, looking at my family, you know, and to see like on a more personal level just how this burden of strength has affected. And I, you know, we're able to go on, we're able to live, but even with my emotionalness, still feeling out of touch with being able to fully express that. So like, yes, the tears may come, I may not be able to hold them back, but I should not feel ashamed of them. But because, you know, this burden of strength, it is this idea of like, what, you know, that's weakness, you know, like tears are not a release. Like that's what is being, you know, relayed is like, this is not a release, this is weakness. You should be able to take stuff stoically. And that ultimately just cuts off just the humanness of tears. And then I often think it says in the Bible about how like the Lord bottles our tears. And so it's just like the intentionalness of that verse to mention our tears, like that these are bottled, these are precious, and yet we have made them something, like the world has made them something that is less than, something that would like, make you feel less than.
Right.
And so, yeah, no, it's just, Any other thoughts?
I can't think of any at the moment. No, but I think tears are good. I think, like I said, tears are freedom. It just release, I think, pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's almost like I have to actually illustrate it. It's like having a water hose, and that water hose, you haven't released that valve so that the water can come out. And once you release that valve, that water just, it comes out pouring, It does. And it's like a freedom. It's been released. Yeah.
Mm. How do you handle the burden of strength now versus when you were younger? But then also, do you feel like maybe you're more aware of it now than you were before?
Definitely more aware of it now than I did before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was kind of just I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, realizing what it is, putting a name to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's,
yeah. And I think because I'm speaking of me being at a younger age, I think that you just don't see the value of things, the value of life, to where you're just moving and you're not taking the time to stop and realize these things. But I've gotten older. My children are grown. I have more time to stop and think. But when you're I'm gonna even say from teenage years, you're just moving so fast. You're trying to just fill out life. And then later on you get married, and you have children, and just different things that happen throughout your life. You're not taking the time to stop and just look around and realize these things. But when you get older and things begin to get a little quieter, start slowing down a little bit, you have a lot of time to think. But it depends on the person too. Because some people, they make the time to stop and think, but
also the outlets that are available now versus,
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah. But I'm just speaking of myself, just speaking of myself.
Yeah. Being able to kind of see those things clearer now because there are less distractions.
Correct.
Less
Correct.
plates spinning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Definite. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I kind of like it in my older age that I can stop and just think. Because I know there's times when you just couldn't stop and think. You had to keep moving. You did. And by the time you were able to stop and think, you were lying down going to sleep for the next day to happen. But when you get older,
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm saying for me because everyone's not like that. Yeah. But I'm sure a lot of women that you can talk to can tell you that's what happens for them as well. Yeah. They go back and just recollect on their life to see how their life was before opposed to today. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed this. Yeah.
Alrighty. Until next time.
All right.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Here to Edify. As always, you can find this podcast wherever you listen, with new episodes uploaded every Wednesday. Thank you again, and hope to catch you listening next time.